Today we're going to have a discussion with one of my favorite YouTubers, Fred Wheeler of How to D&D. And Fred's going to be talking about why there are levels in dungeons. It's a really interesting conversation. Fred's always great to talk to. Today I'm talking to Fred Wheeler of How to D&D. Hello, Fred.
Hi, Kevin. I'm looking forward to the topic for today.
So am I, because it's about dungeons. Viewers of my channel know that I love dungeons. Even though we moved out into the wilderness, in the beginning we played dungeons exclusively. I still have a soft spot for them. I've thought about designing dungeons, and they've evolved, and you have the mega dungeon and the small dungeon. And when I talked about this with Fred, he said, I am researching dungeons, Kevin. And I'm like, research? That's interesting. And he told me the various topics. One of the things that he said was, why are there levels in dungeons? And I thought, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming maybe a game mechanic thing, or is this the way dungeons really were, or whatever? How does this help the players or the GM? Fred is going to fill us in with this. He's done his research. So, Fred, I guess my question is, why are there levels in dungeons?
So the first thing is, I was actually running through Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and it's got multiple levels, 23 levels. It's a mega dungeon, so it's enormous. And I could not find all the information I really wanted on the internet because it's sort of lost to time. So you kind of have to sort of sift through lots of different things to actually find the information. But one of the most obvious reasons for having dungeons is that when you look at dungeon design where it's descending from the surface and going deeper and deeper, the deeper you go, the harder everything in the dungeon gets, and the easier stuff is at the top. And the reason for doing that is to allow players to actually figure out where the sweet spot is for them during their adventuring, so they're not in a location that's too difficult for them to deal with, rather than relying on the dungeon master to tweak and adjust those dials to make sure that they are in a place where their characters can actually deal with.
And this is interesting because I did my dungeon cliche video where I talked about that. The the tough monsters being at the bottom is a cliche, only because I thought, well, logically, wouldn't they be at the top? Wouldn't the tough things stay right where they could easily get outside or easily catch whoever comes in? But of course, as you're saying, from a game mechanic thing, when they first started playing, you have to enter, unless you discover some secret entrance, but as a first level or second, you got to enter at the first level. So it does make sense from a game mechanics to set it up that way, even if logically it might not make sense. Okay. What other things did you discover about designing dungeons? Or why there are levels in dungeons?
So one of the things that's definitely spelled out is that each level represents a character level. Often the dungeons are designed that way to allow for that space to be used for a particular character level. So that means that your first level is often for your first level character. Unless, of course, you're starting your campaign at level 3, then your first level would be for level 3 characters. And if you're starting your campaign at level 5, then the top level is going to be for level 5 characters. And every time they descend another level, it actually lines up and reflects the character level that the players are using.
And do you think that this is a situation where your players see like a stairway? How deep is a level? So if I see a stairway and it goes down 10 or 15, do I know, hey, wait a minute, I'm going to come out on the 4th level here or whatever? How do you impart that to the players so they don't get caught on a level that's inappropriate?
So I think one of the things with anything that leads downward, that's usually a clue for the players and their characters that they are going to be potentially going into an area that's more difficult. So if you're an experienced player, most of the time, and a lot of my experienced players will have alarm bells. As soon as there's a staircase that goes down, or an elevator, or a ladder, or a shaft, or anything that is descending in any manner, or a ramp, they're like, okay, that might actually be leading us to a different level in this dungeon, which might in fact be more difficult. So they won't necessarily take those. Instead, they will continue to explore the existing level they're on before changing that level.
I don't know how much you run with inexperienced players or you have that combination. Is there a way you can convey, because one of the things we always knew playing D&D was you needed to explore each level completely, or as completely as possible, before you went to the next level. Sometimes some GMs like to put like the adventure games where you had to have this key or you had to have that thing. But sometimes you just didn't want to have things behind you or whatever, right? That, it just generally was a good practice. Is this something you tell the players, or do you even believe this to be true, or how do you work with that?
So dungeon levels are usually marked in some way. They're usually marked in difficulty and theme, and also sort of clues to the future, what they might be expected. And those markers can consist of many different things, but often it might be a painting or paintings, statues, carvings, language, different types of language that they come across that's printed on walls or in books or carved into wood or stone. It can also be tapestries, furniture, decorations, and inscriptions. All of those play a major part in actually indicating to a player that they are in a place that may well be more difficult, because it'll give them images of the sorts of things they're likely to encounter on that level.
Is there any rule, do you think, in terms of how many rooms a level should have? If a pit, is that considered a level? Even because if it's on a specific height, that's a level. Or does a level have to consist of, it can't just be the landing stairs that go down deeper, it has to be at least 1 or 2 rooms, or how do you feel about that?
So I see nothing that indicates that there's a set rule for the number of rooms or spaces within a dungeon level. In fact, a dungeon level might consist of a big cavern with a lot of sort of nooks and crannies in it, and it might not look like a dungeon at all. In fact, when you go into that location, you might feel like have we just gone outside? Because you'll look up and you'll see a blue sky, and that's done maybe magically. You may find that you feel you're in a swamp or a forest, because there is a swamp or forest on this level. And it may be a product naturally forming, like a hollow earth sort of idea, or it might be done magically with lots of illusions, or things that have been deliberately planted or placed there.
How about, do you think, in terms of logic or in terms of the depth of, okay, what should be the height difference if I'm designing a dungeon? I'm making this on my own. I'm trying to go by this sort of schema or template that you're talking about for sort of this is kind of classical D&D. What should be the height difference between levels?
I think the idea behind the height of your space for that level is that where possible, you try to give it enough distance to allow exploration vertically within that space or level, to make it more interesting so that people can jump off things, drop down on things, and generally interact with the environment a bit more. The idea is that you try to give it a bit of variety. Dungeons don't need to be boring and follow exactly the same structural architecture as you descend within them.
What do you think about things like, I guess this a little bit into design, but not really this, having air shafts, in terms of, is it the logic of it, or is it just that it gives things, you get secret entrances, or you can go down multiple levels with an air shaft or something like that when you're thinking about the levels of a dungeon?
So I think the idea behind air shafts and staircases that continue downward, you can build them so they're logical. Maybe it's a mine. A dungeon might simply be a mine that's been partly carved out to allow exploration to grab coal or gold or silver or whatever it is.
You have this template where you have the harder monsters as you go lower into the dungeon. And I'm wondering, in terms of getting players to explore the deeper levels, how do you, is it just the experience, or do you also design in terms of what's down there, the treasure and the rewards at the lower levels?
That's exactly it. Essentially, a normal, sensible individual, or even a sensible player, would know that going down deeper means you're going to be facing monsters, creatures that are much harder to deal with. And to entice them to do so, rather than bugging out, is you've got to put down something there that's worth getting, to force them to explore, to encourage them to explore If you put the better rewards and treasures down below and they understand that that's how a dungeon works, then you will get them to face those monsters or deal with those monsters or sneak past those monsters. But yeah, that's to encourage them to keep exploring the dungeon so they keep coming back each week.
So here's another interesting question in terms of the concept of levels or moving somewhere in a dungeon from one place to another, and that's portals and gates. And talk a little bit about your research in terms of, the differences between, stairs or elevators, whether mechanical or, magical, and a portal and a gate in a dungeon.
So one of the problems with using a portal or a gate or a teleportation circle, anything that isn't normal structures for moving from one level to another, is they may take you to another level that is just below you, or it might take you significantly further down where you do not want to go because it's way too difficult for you to deal with. And the worst case scenario is you have usually no idea where they'll lead to. They can take you to completely new, different worlds, a different plane of existence. They can take you into traps or trap rooms. They are designed there to do things, and it's not necessarily completely clear where they will lead.
I sometimes would have players that just can't resist a portal, right? Even if they're just like, well, I'm playing the game. The king won't kill us all, will he? And then I've experienced players that in the old days used to say, oh, he'll kill you. If you screw up, you're dead, and then they'd be like, oh, okay. But then they'd be bitter. Why make a portal if I can't go through, And again, because I had the same thing. Sometimes people went through portals and it took them a year of game time, whatever that is in real time. It took them a long time to get back, right? They had to figure out where they were and get back. And, and I had some, their plane of existence or just 1,000 miles away on the world and they didn't know how they could get back and this sort of thing. So, do you think that in a way a portal or a gate, should that be the focus of a dungeon, or is it just something that maybe the person that created the dungeon just uses to move around?
So portals, gates, and teleport circles, things that are there that might take you to places that are not appropriate for your character and are much more difficult, they're actually usually got a key. They're usually not just open. You have to do something to trigger them, and you have to figure that out. And that might take some time. And when you use them, the intention is that when you come across them, they're not necessarily appropriate for where you currently are in terms of the level of the dungeon. They're there as an extra. And those extras can be approached at any time. You can go back to those locations. And that's what my players will do, is when they are ready, they've already made a note of where they are, but they're not going to use them. And they will come back when they're a much higher level and they will go and see what's there.
All right, Fred. Well, this has been a very interesting discussion. Are there any other things that you wanted to bring up in terms of the importance of levels in a dungeon?
There's probably only two more things, and that is usually each level is punctuated or spotlights or features a boss monster or a villain of some kind. There might be more than one, and there's multiple ways to deal with them. Okay, you don't have to just go and try and kill them. They may be unkillable for all you know. And the other thing is that there's usually secret areas, and it's very important to find those secret areas. You probably won't find all of them, but if you can find as many as you can, it's a good thing because it improves your chance of success as you explore the dungeon. Because as a general rule, there will be things in the higher levels that will be useful when you get further down into the levels of that dungeon. And if you don't have them, then you can't access those locations or you can't access those items that will improve your chance of success. The key behind all of this, as you've already said, Kevin, is that you have to explore every nook and cranny of the dungeon to improve your chances of success and often to be successful overall.
I agree, and I'd state that over and over. There was a time when we went through our evolution of playing D&D where we wanted it all to make sense, and these dungeons have to be purposeful. Why would someone... It's a game. We're trying to have fun. And you know what? I'm going to put clues in this and that, and I'm going to have this in this hidden chamber. And then my players get used to, they search every room, they look in every chest and everything, because they'll find something that doesn't seem to have any purpose. What is this little photo, not photo, maybe a little picture frame or whatever. And sure enough, it relates to something they see later. It's a game, right? We're having fun. And of course, to me, when you understand what the dungeons are for and how they're supposed to be fun, that's the whole purpose of the game. All right, Fred. Well, thank you so much for having this discussion. Every time I talk to you, I learn something about D&D, which is, to me, the funnest thing to learn about. So thanks again to my viewers, and I can't wait to have another discussion with you, Fred.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been fun, and I look forward to another topic at some time.
So again, thank you, Fred Wheeler of How to D&D. I'm looking forward to talking. I'm going to be talking to Fred on his channel about dungeon design, some of my ideas, so look forward to that. Until then, please subscribe to my channel if you like it. I'm always looking for more. Please leave comments because I always answer them. And most importantly, my friends, keep playing D&D and tell somebody else about it.